All right, what's up, guys? So, being neurodivergent and having a physical disability makes you a target to be put down on in this society because majority of people don't have a physical disability. Most people are mobile. Majority of people are neurotypical, so they think in a typical way. They socialize in a neurotypical sense, you know. So if you are born with a physical disability, if you are born neurodivergent, you're outnumbered by these people, and it's not your fault. You never asked for these genetics, and you never asked for this harsh treatment. You never asked to be a target in a bad way where you feel embarrassed, you feel humiliated, you get bullied, right? And when you're neurodivergent, a lot of times you can have a hard time keeping a job. Like with autism, I heard it's like 80% of people on the spectrum have a hard time keeping a job. They're underemployed or unemployed, And yeah, there's people on the spectrum that are able to keep a job. I'm not saying there isn't, and they are able to have a quality of life and stuff like that. But maybe that's because their autism doesn't affect them that much. Maybe they have supportive parents. Maybe they're lucky. Maybe their special interests helps them make money. So yeah, but still, like being on the spectrum, you could get discriminated. You can have a hard time with your sensory issues working at these jobs. They're too stressful, or these heightened senses can affect you physically, and that can burn you out. All those things. So even with a learning disability, like if you have a hard time getting something, you are slow to get it, and you have bad memory or something, you have a hard time focusing, people are going to get pissed. People are going to lose their patience. People are going to talk smack behind your back and think you're stupid or something, And like the same thing with autism. There are people with learning disabilities that are able to get decent jobs and they can have a quality life, but it depends on other circumstances, But when you have a learning disability, you're at a disadvantage compared to people that don't have it, and you can get treated like garbage. And it's even worse when it's comorbid with like autism or ADD, or you have like a mental illness with it, like you have bipolar, or other comorbidities, it makes you more of a target, basically, in society. And I guess another one with the autism and the learning disability, and all these other things, like if you're able to keep a job, get a quality of life, maybe it's because of your looks also, maybe that's part of it, because people like good looking people, and it's even worse when you have a birth defect. You have a intellectual disability. A lot of times, that's even harder to get a job, and you never asked for those, And it's terrible. And you just hope that you have supportive parents to take care of you while someone struggles with this intellectual disability, or this birth defect, like Down syndrome, And a lot of times people don't treat them seriously, And yeah, there's people that have good lives that have these things too, They have friends and they have things like that, but it's hard for them to keep a job as well, Even though there's something called Disabilities Act, Same thing with a physical disability. People won't treat them as seriously also, because most people don't have a physical disability or some rare condition, People want to put those people down also, and they never ask for that, And a lot of times there's parents out that gave these kids these problems, and they did it to themselves. They were drinking while they were pregnant, or smoking while pregnant, or eating junk food when the kid wasn't supposed to be. And they knew that they have a family history of bad genetics that can potentially be passed on. And those type of parents should know better, And they don't care about that, obviously. I feel like no matter what, like even if the parent plans on having a kid and is aware, with certain things, like should always keep that in mind that the kid can struggle with these things, And a lot of times when you're neurodivergent, you have a physical disability, there's bullying involved. There's people out there that are that shallow and superficial, and they want to put them down because, like this neurotypical knows how to socialize is better. This neurotypical is not in special ed, and wants to say, I'm better than you. I'm not in those classes. I have a status. Look at you, It's pathetic, what I mean? Thing is, like, people just don't care, like, how you're born, it seems like. And it's not your fault. They don't seem to care about that. It's just, it's all about trying to see you at your downfall even more, right? There's too many people like that throughout school and adulthood, I'll say you're just a target everywhere, if you're neurodivergent and you have a physical disability, you'll get judged more harshly than someone that doesn't have these things. Maybe you will get judged less if you were more good looking, because there's good looking neurodivergent people, or people that have a physical disability or something, or like you were born rich, you have money, but then that means they're using you because you have certain things, right? So, but yeah, when you're neurodivergent, you're a target out there. You're gonna witness a lot of people treat you a certain way, and I think it's best to keep your guard up, It's best to always do that. And I think the worst thing about it is it's not always just neurotypicals or people that don't have like a physical disability that put them down, It's even neurodivergent people do this. Even people that do have a physical disability bully other neurodivergents and stuff, That's even worse, right? Fucking sucks, ain't it? Yeah, and that's why a lot of them have to be on disability, because like there's a lot of messed up people out there, and they're unwilling to teach them how to do the job, or their neurodivergence, their disability is so intense that they can't even function out in this world, So they have to be on disability, and you're more of a target too, because society views people on disability as lazy when you tried your best, you tried doing everything, and you just can't do it no more, Your neurodivergence, your disability, can't even like adapt to this shit anymore, So even with a mental illness like bipolar, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, or BPD, or all those other ones, right? You go to mental hospitals all the time, people will think you're crazy. People think that you're violent, Not all of them are violent. A lot of them can get discriminated as well, And a lot of people like to instigate people that have mental illnesses all the time, And that's not cool. And there is people that have a mental illness that are able to get a quality of life. They get their treatment, their medication's good, and they're able to cope, and they're able to have decent lives, But that's not all of them. People don't tell you the other side. where it's so intense where nothing else can help them. So they have to be on disability as well, you know? So you're like a target in society when you're neurodivergent or have a physical disability. And it's not your fault because two parents had sex and they're not aware of what kind of genetics they're going to give you. And you're given these things, you know? They're unaware of epigenetics, obviously, too. Like if these parents were abused at childhood, and it can affect them so much, it could change the gene expression. It could change the DNA, and it can create a child with a disability or mental illness or physical health problem or disability, you know? So, yeah. But I think when you're neurodivergent, I think a lot of people put them down a lot more too than the physical disability, because they don't see the neurodivergence right away. They see the physical disability. Unless your neurodivergence is like obvious with the behaviors, you know, like with autism or ADD or something, you know. But yeah, I mean, not trying to ignore physical disability, but I just see it that way also, you know. They all need to be addressed. They're all issues that need to be talked about, and no one should be judgmental and be so shallow with these people, you know. But in a world where it's superficial and shallow, people are going to be like this all the time, you know. And it's passed on from parents telling them about people with these problems, you know. So that's another thing. Parents even tell these kids, like, oh, don't hang out with them. This guy has this, you know. It's kind of pathetic in a lot of ways. Yeah, another one with these parents, they don't really realize, like, when the child is at birth, like, it could be strangled by the umbilical cord, because that happens. You can get a birth defect from that, you know. I'll say when the kid can get injured at birth, it can hit its head and you get problems then, and it can affect the kid for a while, you know. While it has these bad genetics, you know. And I guess, like, these parents don't realize, like, if they're living in a place where there's so many, like, toxins in the air, there's pollution, that can affect the kid, possibly. There's a bunch of factors, man. And then these kids are born with these things, and they're a target in society. They get treated like garbage, you know? Yeah. Saw a comment from Adonio Rohai. You can create enemies when you're neurodivergent. I agree, you know, because this world is not neurodivergent. It's a neurotypical world. This world's more mobile. It's not filled with people that have a physical disability, you know. And when they see someone like a neurodivergent or someone that has a physical disability doing well in its life, has more of a quality than this neurotypical, for example, they'll get jealous, they're hateful, they'll shove things down your throat, you know, and they'll try to bully you, they'll do all kinds of things. Yeah, but we'll go full in depth with, like, these videos, like we'll talk about more about autism, ADD, birth defects. We'll talk about learning disabilities. We'll talk about physical disability, and we'll talk about why it's selfish to have kids with that shit, because it's not always guaranteed they'll have a good life and overcome obstacles and challenges when having these things, even though there's ones that do, right? We'll do the same thing how we were doing in our old channel with that stuff. But I think that might be it. I rambled a lot on this one, but I'll catch you guys later.